To violence, children in fear, but it's funny I promise, told, little girl gets revenge on a boy a year after he messed with her. Setting, 1982 Los Angeles metro area. I was 6 to 7 yo girl. My grandpa bought me a cool toy airplane. It was a green dual-propeller fighter plane, made of metal. I took it to school one day for show and tell. I had researched the plane and who flew it during which battle, etc., and was ready for my report. I took it out at recess. This little so. Victor asked to play with it. Then he wouldn't give it back. I cried and complained to the teacher. The principal got involved and said I must be lying because girls don't play with that stuff. He refused to look at my proof, the report I wrote for the presentation. So Victor, smirking, got to take it with him. I was not able to do my report and got a 0 on the assignment. I was ahead in reading and other subjects, usually a teacher's pet. I was not used to getting poor grades, or being called a liar, so the incident was devastating for that reason more than the loss of the plane. My mom came to pick me up from school and I told her what happened. She immediately parked and stormed the principal's office and tore him a new one. We showed him my notes for the report. He apologized and went to look for Victor. Well, Victor was gone by then. The principal said there was nothing the school could do to make him give it back. I was pissed. I was like, can't you give him detention until he returns it? But they were wimps about it and told me to drop it. Victor would make airplane noises and make his hand into a little airplane around me when no one else understood what he was doing. He was a little sociopath. I hated him but was pretty powerless about it. Fast forward about 6 months. My mom started working 16 shifts on weekends only and I would get babysat for the whole weekend, spending the night. I was at one couple's house for about a year but they tried to baptize me against my will without telling my mom. She was pissed and fired them. She had to work the next weekend and was desperate for a babysitter. Fortunately a friend pointed her in Consult's direction. Consult, let's call her C, was a 50-something-year-old grandma with 100 kids at her house she would watch at all hours. She had a bunch of teen and 20-something yo boys of her own. She was originally from Mexico and they spoke almost exclusively Spanish. I was a hard-working woman, she also had a full-time job during the weekdays, and did great with the kids. But she had a temper. Her boys were slovenly and would mope about. She would holler at them. When she hollered we all fell in line. Or you got the business end of her wooden spoon. Sometimes she would yell at me but I didn't understand as my Spanish was pretty rudimentary. I was taking it in school and had quite a few Spanish-speaking friends, but when I would yell I would get stressed and not understand. I usually would just hide under the bed and stay out of sight. I realized after a while that I was mostly bark and got used to her after a while and learned how to not piss her off. She called me her good girl and I rarely got in trouble. But I harbored some hard feelings towards I as you can imagine. One Saturday after about 6 months of staying at C's house on weekends, Mom drops me off and who do I see in living room, but Victor. I was like oh hell no, now I have to be around this little so. And try to avoid getting yelled at all weekend. Ugh. But then a plan came to me. I observed that Victor didn't speak much Spanish, he was half Mexican but lived with the non-Spanish speaking parent after a divorce, and he was out of his element. Gone was the smirking butthead. He had big eyes, full of fear. The first time I went off on one of her boys in front of Victor he was stunned. The son got fired from his job and when he told her she chased him around the house with her spoon. He was twice her size and was completely cowed by her. Victor surmised that if that big guy was scared of C, then he better stay out of her way. I was a great cook but she used the cheap cuts of meat and cut corners to feed all those kids. The next day after Victor started coming, a Sunday, she gave us sandwiches for lunch. As an adult I love avocados, but as a kid I thought they were grody. She handed us a chicken gristle with a huge slab of avocado. One simply does not refuse to eat C's food. It is a surefire way to get hollered at. Victor ate his in the other room, unobserved by anyone. I took a few bites in front of I to show her I was eating it. I looked for a way to dispose of, like give it to the dog or something like I usually did when I didn't like what I was given. But the dog was out with one of C's sons. Then the plan all came together. C's son who was home watching got up to go to the bathroom or something. I lightning fast fucked the sandwich under the son's easy chair where it would not be seen. Then I go about my day and go back home that night. I see Victor at school all week and he went back to his smirking is about the airplane business from before. That Saturday we were back at C's house all weekend and he's the meek little angel like last weekend. I goes in the room and says what's that smell? In Spanish. I froze up. I was scared, but this was it. This was my moment. I was all innocent pu. What is that? She made her son get up from the easy chair and lifts it to find a nasty moldy sandwich. It was hot outside and I didn't have air conditioning. So that sandwich was a fetid, moldy mess. I whirls around with a crazed glare and looks around at us kids. Everyone scatters but me. I said innocently. Tia, I saw Victor in that room with his sandwich last week. Maybe he dropped in on accident, with big sweet good girl eyes. She laser focuses on Victor, who runs for his life. Victor! Get back here! He climbs a tree and she can't get to him. He spent some time in the tree and wouldn't come down. She went inside to call his parent to come get him. I made eye contact with Victor and made airplane noises and smiled. In that moment he knew I had orchestrated the whole thing. I never saw him at C's house again. I would see him at school and he never messed with me, again. Epilogue, Inception Revenge. When I came back into the backyard to tell Victor his parent was coming, a dead mouse got flipped into her shoe, flip-flops. She was mortally afraid of rodents. I watched, fascinated, likely smiling evilly, waiting for her to notice. She noticed my gaze, looked down and saw the mouse in her shoe. She screamed and hollered. Later that day I caught her looking at me, scrutinizing me. I think she understood the depths of my playful evil in that moment.